The shuttle docked at Kethvar Station at 0400, and the lights were the first problem. They were Vorkai lights, tuned for Vorkai eyes, a blue-white that hit human retinas like a small argument. Lena Marsh stepped off the gangway, blinked 3 times, and decided not to mention it. 40 cadets from 9 species filled the orientation bay. She counted 2 other humans on the walk from the shuttle to the processing line. Both male. Both taller than her. One of them caught her eye and gave a small nod, the nod of a person who has just found the only familiar thing in a room and is quietly relieved about it. She nodded back, then looked away. The processing line moved slow. The Vorkai intake officer had 7 fingers on each hand and typed with all of them, which was something to see and also deeply strange to watch. Lena kept her eyes on the floor instead. The floor was matte grey alloy, slightly textured, the kind of surface built for grip during combat drills. She filed that away. Marsh, Lena, human female, combat track. The intake officer read it without looking up. Intake assessment score, 41 of 100 possible. Sure, Lena said. The officer looked up then. Just for a second. She took her bunk assignment and moved on. Owen Pruitt was already in the bunk room when she arrived. He was sitting on the lower bunk eating a protein ration that smelled like it had stopped trying. He was long, all arms and shins, the kind of person assembled in a hurry from spare parts, and he had the expression of a man who had been alone in an unfamiliar room for 20 minutes and was very glad to see another human face. Owen, he said. Lena. You get 41 too. Yeah. He exhaled. Okay. Good. I got 39, so. He gestured at the ration. Want one? They taste like a gym bag, but there's protein in them. I'm fine. She put her pack under the upper bunk and sat on the floor to sort her gear. Owen watched her for a moment, then went back to his ration. He didn't ask anything else. She respected that. The first full assembly was at 0600. Colonel Drex walked in without announcing himself, and the room went quiet the way rooms do when something very large and very certain enters. He was 7 feet of Vorkai, wide across the chest in a way that made the doorframe look like a suggestion, silver-grey skin, eyes the pale yellow of old bone. His uniform had no decorations on it. He didn't need them. The 40 cadets standing in front of him were enough. He stood at the front and looked them over the way a builder looks at raw materials. Not with contempt. Just with measurement. Calculating what was useful and what was not. He spoke in standard, which the coalition required for mixed species programs. His voice was low and flat and had no warmth in it, and Lena understood quickly that this was just how he was. Not a performance. Just the shape of him. This program has existed for 412 years, he said. In that time it has produced 42 Apex-ranked warriors. 3 of them currently hold senior command positions in coalition forces. This program is not built for comfort. It is not built for inclusion. It is built to find the strongest candidates and make them stronger. If that is not why you are here, the shuttle returns to the hub in 6 hours. Nobody moved. He looked down at his tablet. He began reading intake assessments out loud. This was not cruelty. That was the thing to understand. It was not cruelty. The Vorkai had built their entire culture on honest measurement, on clear accounting of physical capacity and combat aptitude. To read the numbers plainly, to Drex, was a form of respect. To soften them would have been the insult. He read Vorith's score first. Vorith was Vorkai, 19 years old, and had scored 94 out of 100. Drex read the number and said nothing else after it. The number spoke for itself. He moved through the list. Species by species. Score by score. Even and unhurried. When he got to Lena's name, he read it the same way he read all the others. Marsh. Human female. 41. A pause to read the next line. Physical benchmarks. Grip strength, 40% of program standard. Reach, 62%. Bone density and impact tolerance, estimated 45%. Another pause. The Coalition's cross-species initiative required a human combat candidate this cycle. This admission reflects that requirement. He looked up briefly. Not at her. At the room. She is a marginal candidate. We will see what she does with that. He moved to the next name. Lena sat in the 3rd row and did not move her face. The cadet to her left shifted slightly, The specific shift of someone deciding whether to look at her and then choosing not to. Owen, 2 rows back, had gone completely still. Marginal. Not weak. Not failing. Marginal. The word used for a storm system that probably will not develop into anything. The word that means you are barely worth the sentence it takes to describe you. He had said it with the same flat, clean tone he used for every other line. That was the part that made it hard to carry. There was no anger to push back against. No contempt to use as fuel. Just a man reading numbers and stating a fact about her, the same way you might state the weather, and then moving on to more important business. She let it land. Felt it go somewhere inside her that already had a lot of company. After assembly, there was a 90-minute free period before the first conditioning drill. Owen found her at the equipment locker, checking harness fittings. "Hey," he said. "Hey." That was, he stopped. Started over. "You okay?" She pulled a harness strap, checked the tension, released it. "Yeah." Because what he said was, "I know what he said." Owen went quiet. He leaned on the locker next to hers, arms folded, looking at nothing in particular. "I'm just saying. If it were me, I'd be. But it's not you." He looked at her. She wasn't being mean. She was just stating the fact of it. He nodded slowly. "Right. Yeah." She set the harness aside and picked up the conditioning schedule they had been handed after assembly. She read it the way she read everything, carefully, twice, looking for the parts that would hurt and the parts that could be worked around. The drills were built for Vorkai bodies. She could see it in every benchmark. The grip targets, the sprint distances, the impact tests. Every number was calibrated for a species with a different gravity history, a different bone structure, a different 400 years of evolution. She was going to fail most of them. She folded the schedule and put it in her pocket. The bell for the first drill rang and she walked out, and Owen had to move fast to keep up, and she did not look back at the assembly room or the podium or the place where Drex had read her number like a weather forecast and gone on with his morning. She had work to do. That night, Owen lay on the lower bunk looking at the ceiling. Lena was already asleep. He thought about that for a while. The fact of it. Most people, after a day like this one, would need some time. Would need to process. Would lie awake with it. She was already asleep. He got up, found a marker in his pack, and wrote something small on the wall behind his bunk where only he could see it. Asterisk Lena. 0 quits. Asterisk. He capped the marker and lay back down. Outside, the station hummed on through the dark. The first conditioning drill started at 0700 and it was exactly as bad as the schedule had promised. The grip test came first. A bar mounted at shoulder height, Vorkai shoulder height, which put it somewhere around Lena's eye level. The target was 400 kilograms of sustained pressure for 30 seconds. Vorith hit it on his first try, barely looked like he was trying, and stepped off the platform like he had just opened a door. Lena hit 162. The drill instructor, a Vorkai sergeant with a flat face and a data tablet he never looked up from, recorded the number and said nothing. Not a single word. He just wrote it down and moved to the next cadet. That was almost more exhausting than being laughed at would have been. She stepped off the platform and stood to the side. Owen hit 188 and came to stand next to her. "Don't," she said. "I wasn't going to say anything." "Good." They watched the rest of the cadets go. A species called the Drath, heavy, slow, built like compressed rock, hit 300-something. A Pelion, thin as a reed and twice as fast, hit 90. The Pelion looked like he might cry. Lena made a note of that. She was not the floor. The sprint came next. 400 meters on a track calibrated for Vorkai stride length. The target time was 42 seconds. Lena ran it in 61. Her legs were the right length for a human life, not a Vorkai one, and the track spacing worked against her at every step like an argument she hadn't started. She failed that one. She came back and ran it again at the end of the session when the other cadets were cooling down. Nobody asked her to. She just went back to the start line and ran it again. 58 seconds. The sergeant looked up from his tablet for the first time all morning. He wrote down both numbers and said nothing. That was week 1. Week 2 was worse in a different direction. The drills got longer, and the impact test started. They put each cadet into a padded ring with a pressure sensor and a Vorkai sparring drone that hit at calibrated force. The point was not to win against the drone. The point was to absorb impact and stay standing. Lena got knocked down 8 times in the first session. She got up 8 times. The drone hit her again, and she went down a 9th time and lay there for a second staring at the ceiling with the particular feeling of someone whose entire body has filed a formal complaint. Owen was watching from the side. He had his mouth pressed shut in the way of someone actively not saying anything. She got up. She finished the session with more floor time than standing time, and her benchmark score was 53% of standard, and she went back to the bunk room and sat on the floor and ate a protein ration and did not say a single word about any of it. Owen sat across from her and ate one too. They taste worse on bad days, he said. They don't taste like anything. Right, but today they don't taste like anything worse. She looked at him. He shrugged. She almost smiled. Almost. The thing about the program, the thing that nobody said out loud but everyone understood, was that it was built on a very specific idea of strength. The Vorkai had been developing this program for 400 years, and in those 400 years the word strength had come to mean one particular thing. It meant force. It meant impact. It meant the measurable, observable transfer of power from one body to another. It meant size and density and output. It did not have a word for what Lena was doing. What Lena was doing was watching. In the evenings, when the rest of the cohort was resting or running social hours in the common area, she was in the training hall studying the sparring drone's movement patterns. She watched it for 2 hours the first night and figured out that it led with its right shoulder 100% of the time before a centermass strike. She watched it for another hour the second night and found that its left side had a half-second delay in response, a calibration quirk, probably, something that hadn't been noticed or corrected because no one who trained against it at Vorkai force levels would ever need to notice something that small. She noticed it. She started hitting the drone in that half-second window. Her scores didn't jump overnight. Nothing in this program moved overnight. But they moved. Week 3, she passed the impact test at 67% of standard. The sergeant wrote it down. Didn't say anything. But he wrote it in a slightly different column than he'd been using, and she saw that, and she filed it away. Vorith noticed. She didn't realize it at first. He was not the kind of person who stared. He was precise and quiet, and he moved through the program the way a very sharp knife moves through things, cleanly, without drama, and with a total lack of interest in what it left behind. He trained. He scored. He was polite when spoken to. He did not engage with other cadets outside of necessary interaction. But in the 3rd week, during the afternoon sparring rotations, she caught him watching her from across the training hall. Not long. Just the specific, focused look of something that has detected a variable it hadn't previously accounted for. She looked back. He turned away. She thought about that for the rest of the session. Owen noticed too, because Owen noticed everything and processed it into words immediately. Vorith was watching you, he said, walking back from drills. I know. Is that good? I don't know yet. Because his, I mean his really. I know what he is, Owen.
Owen nodded fast.
Right. Yeah. Okay. A beat. His very large is all I was going to say. He is. Like structurally. Like his arms are the size of my entire. Owen. Yep. Done. She wasn't scared of Vorith. That wasn't quite the right word for what she felt when she thought about him. It was more like the feeling of standing at the edge of something very deep and very cold, a feeling that was neither good nor bad but was very honest about the situation. She had no illusions about what she was. She was 138 pounds of Dayton, Ohio, in a program built for creatures who had evolved under heavier gravity on a harder planet. She had failed more benchmarks in 3 weeks than most cadets failed in a full cycle. And she had come back from every single one of them. That night Owen updated the tally on the wall. He'd been updating it every night, actually. A small mark for each day. He'd started adding notes next to some of them. Small things, nothing dramatic. Asterisk passed impact test. Ran the sprint twice. Ate the bad ration without complaining. Again. Asterisk. He didn't tell her about it. He wasn't sure why, exactly. It just felt like the kind of thing that shouldn't be said out loud. Like naming it would change its weight. He added the days mark and lay back down. Down the hall, in the training room, the sparring drone sat dormant in the dark. Its left side still had the half-second delay. Nobody had fixed it. Nobody else had found it. Outside the station, Space went on in every direction without any interest in benchmarks or scores or what any of them were doing inside this particular metal box, trying to become something worth the program's 400-year investment. Lena slept. In the morning she would fail something else. In the morning she would come back from it. That was the whole plan. That was the entire plan. It was not a complicated plan, but it was the only one she had brought with her, and so far, against every reasonable expectation, it was working. The mid-program combat assessment was held on a Thursday. Nobody slept well the night before. The bunk room was quiet in the particular way of people who are pretending to sleep and not doing it very convincingly. Owen ate 2 protein rations after lights out, which was one more than his usual bad day count. Lena lay on her back and stared at the ceiling and thought about angles. Just angles. Nothing else. The assessment hall was the largest room on Kethvar Station. It had a proper ring at the center, raised platform, smooth floor, for corner judges seated on elevated chairs. The walls were bare. The lighting was Vorkai standard blue-white. All 40 cadets stood in rows on the observation floor, and Colonel Drex stood at the front with his tablet and his flat, measuring eyes, and the whole room had the specific weight of something that mattered. He started with the lowest-ranked cadets and worked up. This was the format. Each cadet entered the ring alone and ran a combat sequence against 2 sparring drones simultaneously, and Drex watched and scored and said whatever he said, and then the next one went. It was clean. It was efficient. It had no mercy in it and did not pretend to. The Pelian cadet went early. He was fast, genuinely fast, the kind of fast that made the eye work hard to track him, and he moved around the drones well for most of the sequence, but when the second drone closed the angle on him he panicked and went wide and took a hit to his left side that dropped his score by 12 points. He stepped off the platform with his jaw set and went back to his row and did not look at anyone. Lena watched the way the second drone changed its angle. She watched it very carefully. More cadets went. Scores were read. Drex said what he said, sometimes a single word, sometimes nothing. He was not a man who used words to fill space. Then Vorith went. It was different. Anyone in the room could see it was different from the first second he stepped onto the platform. He didn't adjust his stance or look at the drones before they activated. He just stood in the center of the ring with his hands loose at his sides and waited, and when the drones came he moved through them the way water moves through a space, not fighting the angles but using them, redirecting, letting the drone's own momentum work against them. He hit clean and he hit hard and he never once looked like he was trying. The sequence ended. He stepped back. His breathing had barely changed. Drex looked at the score on his tablet for a moment. That, he said, is what this program is built to produce. That was all. But in 400 years of Vorkai understatement, that was the same as a standing ovation. Vorith stepped off the platform and returned to his row. He didn't smile. He didn't look around to see who had watched. He just stood and folded his hands behind his back and waited for the assessment to continue. Lena was near the end of the list. She stepped onto the platform when her name was called and took her position at the center. The drones activated. She ran the sequence. She did not perform the way Vorith had performed. She was never going to perform the way Vorith had performed, and she had made her peace with that somewhere around week 2. What she did instead was survive the sequence cleanly. She moved early on every strike, hit the specific angles she had spent 3 weeks identifying, and did not take a single clean impact to her core. She was not fast by the program standards. She was not powerful by the program standards. But she read everything the drones were going to do before they did it, and she was never where the hit was going. She stepped off the platform. Drex looked at her score. He looked at it longer than he had looked at most of the others. Something moved across his face. Not much, just a small shift, the expression of a man doing a calculation he had not expected to need to do. Then he looked up at the room. Marsh, he said. Human female. Score, 59. A pause. This is an improvement on her intake assessment. She has worked. Another pause. But the scoring structure of this program accounts for absolute output, not relative improvement. 59 is below the program threshold for full ranking consideration. He looked at his tablet again. The human biological template was not constructed for this kind of combat work. Her scores reflect that. She is here because the Coalition's cross-species initiative placed her here. That is a political decision. What this program deals in is not politics. He moved the tablet to his side. She is a footnote in this cycle's results. We will continue. He called the next name. Lena walked back to her row. She passed Owen on the way and did not look at him, and he did not say anything, and that was the right choice from both of them. She stood in her row and watched the rest of the assessment and did not move her face and did not let anything she was feeling have a surface to show itself on. Footnote. He had said marginal in week 1 and now he had said footnote, and she understood that to Colonel Drex these were simply accurate words for an accurate situation, and she understood that he was not saying them to hurt her, and she understood all of that completely. It still landed the way it landed. The assessment ended. Drex left. The cadets broke formation and moved toward the hall exit in groups and pairs, and the room filled with the low noise of 40 people decompressing after something tense. Voreth found her at the equipment locker. She heard him before she saw him, the specific sound of something very large and very deliberate moving through a space. She turned around and he was standing 2 feet away with his hands at his sides and his expression perfectly even. Marsh, he said. Voreth. He was quiet for a moment. Not awkward quiet, the quiet of someone choosing words with care. I watched your sequence, he said. Okay. You did not take a single core impact.
No.
He looked at her the way he had looked at her across the training hall in week 3, that specific, focused look of something recalculating. Then he reached into the chest pocket of his training uniform and took out a small flat disk. A challenge token. Standard program issue. Every cadet was given one at orientation for use in formal ring requests. He held it out. I am requesting a standard ring match, he said. Program protocol. Formal. Judged. A pause. Tomorrow morning, if you are willing. The room had gone quiet around them. Not all of it, but the part of it that was close. Owen had stopped moving entirely somewhere behind her left shoulder. Lena looked at the token. She thought about what a ring match with Voreth meant in plain, honest terms. She thought about his arms and his reach and the way he had moved through those drones like they were standing still. She thought about 14 inches of reach difference and the fact that his grip strength alone was more than twice her body weight. She thought about what Drex had just said to the full cohort 40 minutes ago. She took the token. Sure, she said. Voreth nodded once. He turned and walked away with the same clean, unhurried movement he did everything with. No drama, no look back. Like the outcome was already filed and he was simply moving on to the next item in the day. Owen appeared at her elbow the moment Voreth was out of earshot. Lena. Owen. That was, you just, he stopped. You said sure. I did. To Voreth. Yes. He stared at her. She put the challenge token in her pocket and turned back to the equipment locker and finished checking her harness fittings the same way she had been before Voreth arrived. Owen stood behind her for a moment, working through something internally, and then he sat down on the bench and put his elbows on his knees and looked at the floor. Okay, he said finally. Okay. What's the plan? Get some sleep, she said. That's it. That's the whole plan. Yes. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Lena, he put a drone through a wall panel last week by accident and the panel was rated for. Owen. Right. Yeah. Sleep. Okay. She picked up her harness and her conditioning bag and walked out of the equipment room. Behind her, Owen sat on the bench alone for a while, turning things over in his head that had no comfortable place to land. Then he got up and went back to the bunk room and added a mark to the wall and went to sleep. In the morning, there would be a ring. In the morning, something was going to happen that this station's 400-year-old program had no category for yet. It just didn't know that yet. The ring sat at the center of the assessment hall, and it looked exactly the same as it had looked the day before. Same raised platform. Same smooth floor. Same 4 corner judges in their elevated chairs. Same blue-white lights that had never once adjusted themselves for human eyes. The hall had not changed at all. Everything else felt different. The full cohort was there. All 38 remaining cadets, 2 had washed out in week 2, standing on the observation floor in the loose, quiet way of people who had gotten up early because they did not want to miss something. Nobody had officially announced anything. Word had moved through the bunk rooms the night before the way word moves in small, closed spaces, fast, and without needing to be sent. Voreth was already in the hall when Lena arrived. He was standing at the far side of the ring, relaxed, doing nothing. That was the thing about him. He never paced, never stretched dramatically, never performed readiness. He was just ready, the way a very old, very solid structure is just standing. He didn't need to show it. Lena set her bag down at the ring's edge and took off her outer jacket. She was wearing her standard training gear under it. She rolled her left shoulder twice, then her right. She looked at the ring floor and then at the corner judges, and then she climbed up and stood on her side of the platform. Drex was seated at the judges' table to the left of the ring. Not standing. Seated, with his tablet in front of him and his pale yellow eyes on the platform, and his expression was the same expression he always had, measuring. Calm. A man waiting to see a number confirmed. Owen was in the front row of the observation floor. He had his arms crossed and his jaw set and the look of someone who had not slept well and was not going to admit it. The senior corner judge called the match to order. Standard program protocol, formal challenge, formal acceptance, 3-minute open engagement, no weapons, judges at all 4 corners. He read the names of both cadets. He stated the terms. He asked both cadets if they understood and accepted. Voreth said yes in Vorkai. Clean and flat. Lena said yes in standard. The judge nodded. The bell rang. Voreth moved first. He came across the platform with the same economy he did everything with. No wasted motion, no flourish, just clean forward momentum, and his body arranged in the Vorkai combat stance that every cadet in the room had watched him use and had never once seen fail. His lead hand was up. His footwork was perfect. 14 inches of reach advantage and bone density that made the air around him feel slightly heavier. The cohort watched. Drex watched. Lena dropped. Not backward, down. She bent her knees and dropped her center of gravity in one fast, clean movement, and she moved inside his reach, inside the distance where those long arms were actually a problem for him rather than an advantage, and she turned her hip into his forward momentum and took his lead arm at the elbow joint. Not the muscle, not the structure, the joint. The specific hinge point that Vorkai anatomy had never needed to protect because no opponent in 400 years of this program had ever gotten close enough to use it. She turned. She used his own forward weight as the engine. Voreth left the ground. It was not a dramatic thing, the way it looked. It was actually very quiet. One moment he was moving forward with all of his mass and all of his certainty, and the next moment physics had a conversation with him that he had not been prepared for, and the floor came up and he hit it on his back with a sound that was not loud but was very final. 11 seconds. The hall was silent. Not the silence of a crowd holding its breath. The silence of 38 cadets and 1 colonel and 4 corner judges all processing something that did not fit into any category any of them currently had. The silence of a room where the expected thing did not happen and nobody has yet figured out what to say about the thing that happened instead. Voreth lay on his back and looked at the ceiling. He was not hurt. That was not why he was still down. He was still down because for the first time in his combat career something had happened that he had not seen coming, had not felt coming, had not had a single frame of warning about, and his body was waiting for his mind to catch up, and his mind was not quite there yet. He turned his head and looked at Lena. She was standing 2 feet away with her hands at her sides. Not in a fighting stance. Just standing, the way she always stood, very still, very even, not performing anything. She reached out her hand. He looked at it for a moment. Then he took it and she helped him up and he stood and looked at her from his full height and she looked back at him from hers. And whatever passed between them in that moment had no name in any language currently spoken on Kethvar Station. The corner judge called the match. His voice broke the silence the way a stone breaks water. The room rippled back to life around it. Sound came back in pieces. Someone exhaled. Someone shifted their feet. Owen did not say anything. He just stood in the front row with his arms still crossed and his eyes a little too bright, and he pressed his lips together very hard, and that was all. Drex had not moved from his chair. He was still seated, still holding his tablet, and he was looking at the platform with his pale yellow eyes, and the expression on his face was something that had not been there before. Not embarrassment. Not anger. Something quieter and more complicated than either of those things. The expression of a man who has been using the same measuring tool for 20 years and has just discovered that the tool does not measure everything. He looked at his tablet. He looked back at the ring. A cadet near the back of the observation floor, a small, quiet one from a mid-tier species who had asked Lena in week 2 how she kept going, leaned to the cadet next to him and said something in a low voice. The other cadet nodded slowly. Lena climbed down from the ring and picked up her jacket from the edge of the platform. She put it on. She picked up her bag. She did not look at Drex. She did not make a speech. She did not look around the room to see who was watching. She just picked up her things the same way she did every morning after every drill, the same way she had done it on the day she failed the grip test and the day she failed the sprint and the day Drex had called her a footnote in front of everyone. Owen fell into step beside her as she walked toward the exit. He lasted 4 steps before he said anything. 11 seconds, he said. Very quiet. I know. I counted. I know, Owen. He was quiet for 2 more steps. Then, where did you even learn that? My grandfather, she said. He did judo for 40 years. Taught me when I was 7. Owen absorbed that. Your grandfather, he said. Yes. Who was just a person on Earth. Who taught you when you were 7 years old. That's what I said. He made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite anything else. They pushed through the exit door and the sound of the hall faded behind them and the corridor lights came up, white and even and indifferent. Behind them, in the hall, the room was still finding its shape again. Still sorting through what it had just seen and where to file it. At the judge's table, Drex looked at the ring one more time. Then he looked down at his tablet and wrote something. What he wrote was not a score. It was a note. 3 words, in Vorkai, in the margin of the day's assessment file, in handwriting that was small and careful and that no one else would read. He closed the file. He sat for a while longer in the empty hall. Outside the station, the stars did not move and did not have opinions, and inside, somewhere down the corridor, a girl from Dayton, Ohio walked back toward the bunk room with her bag on her shoulder, and she was already thinking about tomorrow's drill, and she did not look back. Thinking, the station did not stop for what had happened in the ring. That was the thing about a place built on 400 years of routine. It did not pause for surprises. The meal bell rang at 0800 the same as always. The conditioning schedule posted to the board at 0830 the same as always. The lights stayed blue-white and indifferent, and the corridors filled with the same sounds of boots on alloy flooring, and the program moved forward the way programs do, because programs do not have feelings about 11 seconds. The cadets did. It was not loud. Nobody gathered in a circle and talked about it the way people do in stories. It was quieter than that, a shift in the way the room arranged itself when Lena walked in. A small and careful thing, like furniture that has been moved 2 inches. Close enough to the same that you might not notice. Far enough that the room felt different. The Pelion cadet who had written down what she said in week 2 held the door open for her at breakfast. He didn't say anything. He just held it. She walked through and said thanks and sat down and ate. Owen sat across from her and did not talk for almost 4 entire minutes, which was a record. Then, people are looking at you differently. I know. Like, all the people. I know, Owen. Even the Drath, and they don't look at anyone. She moved her food around her tray. The food was Vorkai standard, same as always, dense, flavorless, built for a metabolism that ran hotter than hers. She had been eating it for 6 weeks and had stopped expecting it to taste like anything. It doesn't change anything, she said. We still have 4 weeks left. Owen looked at her for a moment. It changes some things. She didn't answer that. But she didn't disagree either. Voreth found her 2 days later. She was in the corridor outside the training hall, sitting on the floor with her back against the wall, working through the next week's drill schedule the way she always did, reading it twice, marking the parts that would be hard, thinking about angles. She heard him coming from down the hall. She looked up when he stopped in front of her. He stood there for a moment with his hands at his sides. Then he sat down on the floor across from her, which was something she had never seen him do before. Something about a creature that large choosing to sit on the floor, choosing to be at the same level as someone smaller, had a weight to it that was hard to describe. I have a question, he said. Okay. What you did in the ring. He paused, choosing his words the same careful way he always did. Where does that come from? She looked at him. How much do you know about Earth? Very little. There's a fighting tradition. It's called judo. It's about 2,000 years old. She watched his face. My grandfather practiced it for 40 years. He started teaching me when I was 7. Voreth was quiet for a moment. 2,000 years, he said. About that. And it has been practiced continuously for that entire time. More or less. He looked at the floor. His expression was doing something that she had not seen on a Vorkai face before, a kind of careful, open thinking, the expression of a mind turning something over and finding it heavier than expected. We do not study old things, he said. In our combat tradition, old methods are replaced by better ones. What worked 300 years ago is not what works now. We move forward. I know, she said. I noticed. He looked at her. Something in his expression shifted slightly. That is why you studied the drone sequences. Yes. You were looking for patterns we had stopped noticing. You stopped noticing things you've been doing the same way for a long time, she said. That's not a criticism. It's just how it works. He was quiet again. A long quiet this time, the kind that had real thinking in it. We probably should study old things, he said finally. It was a simple sentence. Plain words, nothing dramatic. But coming from Vorith, from the cadet who had scored 94 at intake, who had been called a demonstration of what the program was built to produce, who had never in his life been put on the floor by anything, it landed like something important. Probably, she said. He stood up. He looked down at her for a moment, and his expression was not the blank, calibrated look he wore during training. It was something more honest than that. Something that had been recalibrated and had not yet finished settling into its new position. You are a very strange kind of strong, he said. She thought about that. Yeah, she said. I get that a lot. He nodded once and walked away down the corridor, and she watched him go and then looked back at her drill schedule and kept working. The last 4 weeks of the program passed the way the first 6 had, 1 day at a time, 1 drill at a time, 1 benchmark at a time. Lena failed things and came back from them. She passed things and did not celebrate them. She ate the bad rations and slept well and watched everything around her with the same steady, patient attention she had walked in with. Her final ranking came in on the last day of the cycle. 71 out of 100. Not apex. Not even close to apex. But 11 points above the program's threshold for full ranking consideration, the threshold that Drex had said, in week 6, in front of everyone, that she would not reach. She read the number, put the sheet down, picked up her pack and started packing. Owen saw the sheet on the bunk and read it and made a sound like air leaving a balloon slowly and in a good way. He went to his wall. The tally was still there, every mark from every day, the notes he had added in small handwriting along the margin. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he took a picture of it on his comm unit and left it on the wall. She saw it when she came back for her last bag. She stood there and looked at it, every mark, every day, the whole shape of it on the wall. She didn't say anything. She picked up her bag and walked out. That night, after the closing assembly, after the scores were read and the rankings were posted and the program formally ended the way it formally ended every cycle with Drex's same flat closing statement delivered with the same flat tone, the assessment hall emptied out. Drex stayed. He sat at the judges' table alone, the way he had sat the morning after the ring match, and he pulled up the training footage on his tablet. Not the 11 seconds. He had watched the 11 seconds already, twice, from 2 different angles, studying the joint mechanics and the weight transfer and the 2,000-year-old principle underneath it. Tonight he watched the 6 weeks before it. He watched the grip test. He watched her step off the platform with 162 kilograms recorded and say nothing and stand to the side. He watched the sprint, the first run, the second run she hadn't been asked to do, the 3 seconds she shaved off between them. He watched the impact tests and the 8 times on the floor and the 9th time she got up. He watched her in the evenings, in the training hall, studying the drone alone for 2 hours at a time, finding the half-second delay in the left side, filing it away, using it. He watched all of it. The hall was very quiet. The lights had dimmed to their night setting, still blue-white, but lower, softer, almost bearable. Outside the station, the stars sat where they had always been and would go on sitting after every cadet in this cycle was old and gone. Drex turned the footage back to the beginning. He was not a man who changed quickly. 400 years of his culture had built him in a very particular shape, and that shape did not bend fast or easily or without discomfort. He knew that about himself. He was honest about most things. But he sat in the quiet hall and started the footage from the beginning again, and he watched it, and in the margin of the open assessment file on his tablet, under the 3 words he had written 2 days ago, he wrote 3 more. He closed the file. He sat for a while longer. Then he stood and straightened his uniform and walked to the door, and the lights in the hall went off behind him 1 section at a time. In the bunk room, Owen took one last look at the tally on the wall before lights out. every mark, every day, all of it adding up to something that did not have a clean name but was very real. Asterisk Lena, 0 quits. Asterisk. He turned off the light. Down the corridor, Lena was already asleep. She had work to do in the morning. She always had work to do in the morning. That was, from the very beginning, the whole point.